President Trump was told by the Attorney General that he is in the Jeffrey Epstein files. He was told he was in the files 2 months ago, and then last week said, no, he wasn't. He was. This was during a briefing on the findings of the Justice Department's review of the documents related to Epstein. That's according to sources familiar with the discussion. Those sources said the Justice Department's review found that the files appeared to include several unsubstantiated claims that they determined not to be credible, including those relating to Trump. Bondi also raised in the meeting that several names of other high-profile figures were mentioned, the official said. And it's worth noting that being mentioned in the files does not in any way indicate wrongdoing. The Wall Street Journal, who first reported this story, said that AG Bondi, who was joined in the briefing by her deputy Todd Blanche, who previously served as President Trump's attorney in the criminal hush money trial. The briefing took place in May, weeks before the Justice Department released a memo on July 6th attempting to close the book on Jeffrey Epstein, which said, quote, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. That memo kicked up a furor in the president's supporters, among them that continues to this day. CNN reached out to the White House about the Journal report. Their response read in part, this is nothing more than a continuation of the fake news stories concocted by the Democrats in the liberal media. That was their response. But we now know the president was told he was in the files, which he was specifically asked about last week.
What did she tell you about the review? And specifically, did she tell you at all that your name appeared in the file?
No. She's given us just a very quick briefing.
No, he says. We asked the Justice Department for reaction to the reporting. Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy AG Todd Blanche, the two officials in that Trump briefing, according to the Wall Street Journal, they released a statement. The DOJ and FBI reviewed the Epstein files and reached the conclusion set out in the July 6th memo. Nothing in the files warranted further investigation or prosecution, and we filed a motion in court to unseal the underlying grand jury transcripts. As part of our routine briefing, we made the president aware of the findings. This report comes as some Republicans on the Hill continue to push for more information. This afternoon, the House Oversight Committee officially subpoenaed Ghislaine Maxwell for a deposition. It's scheduled for August 11th at the Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee, where she's currently serving a 20-year sentence. And late tonight, a subcommittee went even further. They voted to subpoena the Justice Department for the Epstein files. This all happened despite Speaker Mike Johnson shutting down the House a day early to avoid floor votes on any Epstein-related matters. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who voted to subpoena the Justice Department, was asked about Speaker Johnson's move. Listen to this.
What do you think of the Speaker adjourning the House early to avoid this whole fight over Epstein?
This fight's coming no matter, this is here, and I've made it part of my life's mission to protect women and kids, and I think that, I'm ready to take this vote. I think we should take this vote and move forward, move this country forward, and the victims deserve justice and people deserve transparency.
Also today, a federal judge in Florida denied the Justice Department's request to release grand jury documents from the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. That request came at the direction of President Trump late last week in an attempt to quell some of the outrage from his biggest supporters. Well, the judge's ruling is not the last word in grand jury testimony about Epstein. It does underline a glaring fact in all of this. The Attorney General has the power today, tonight, right now, to release other information in the so-called Epstein files sitting at the Justice Department. Sure, they would have to be carefully reviewed and redacted, but she is not doing that, and the president is not really forcing her. For more on all this now, let's go to CNN's Manu Raju on Capitol Hill. Again, where a subcommittee just voted to subpoena the files, Manu, we learned that President Trump told his name is in.
Yeah, and look, this issue has completely consumed the House GOP and undermined the Republican agenda and forced the Speaker of the House essentially to shut down the floor of the House because of the divisions within the GOP. Democrats exploiting those divisions, trying to push votes on Epstein-related matters. That's why the Speaker does not want to move forward with this, because enough Republicans would join with Democrats on these issues. But he could not stop what happened in that subcommittee today. Democrats blindsided Republicans and offered up a a motion calling for a subpoena for all Epstein files. There were enough Republicans, ultimately 3 Republicans, who voted in favor of these Epstein files because they have long called for them themselves. One of them was Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, a conservative member, someone who aligns himself very much with Donald Trump and the MAGA wing of the party. I asked him why he got behind this despite Donald Trump's call to move on.
I just think it's important that the American people know what's occurred here.
The president wants to move on, though. He says it's time to move on.
I've been very clear on my opinion on this issue for a long time.
Okay. Are your constituents clamoring for this information?
Some are, yeah.
I've never handled a subpoena like this. You understand? This is some fascinating stuff, and it has to be handled legally and ethically within the parameters of our rules. So I don't profess to know what all those details are, including the timing, but I assure you that we'll be working together in a bipartisan manner to make certain that that every word is perfect and reflective of what our agreements were today.
And that last comment coming from Congressman Clay Higgins, who's the chairman of the subcommittee overseeing that vote to subpoena the Epstein files. He actually voted against this measure, but he indicated they have to move forward on it given the vote that happened in the committee. And John, as part of the call for the Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, to turn over the Epstein files, they also included language in that Republicans did to target Joe Biden official communications with Justice Department officials over the Epstein matter, and as well as to depose some big figures like former President Bill Clinton, like Hillary Clinton, James Comey, and others. So this is a sweeping subpoena, John. The question is how quickly can they get that information, and how much will the Trump Justice Department cooperate with Republicans in Congress? Yeah,
that's a big question tonight. Manu Raju, thank you very much. Perspective now from former Trump White House Communications Director Alyssa Farah Griffin, former federal prosecutor Elie Honig, and journalist and Lift Our Voices co-founder Gretchen Carlson. Alyssa, I just want to start again with the timeline here, okay? The Justice Department reviews the so-called Epstein files. Attorney General Pam Bondi, we now know, tells President Trump he's in the Epstein files. Elon Musk tweets after that the president is in the Epstein files. Then the Justice Department releases this memo saying, we're not going to tell you any more, America, about the Epstein files. President Trump is asked if he was told he's in the Epstein files. He says no. And so we're here tonight, where we're learning that President Trump was told.
Well, this is a classic case of the cover-up making matters even worse than they already were. Donald Trump's strategy with PR generally is deny, deny, deny. And I suspect that White House comms advisors around him said, why don't we just get out in front of it once they knew this information he was in them? It's been a known fact for years that Jeffrey Epstein was a former associate of Donald Trump's. They could have said his name appears, there's no allegations of wrongdoing. There are things he could have said that could have distanced him and kind of made this a smaller story until something more is made public, which I'm not convinced it ever will be, considering who runs the Justice Department. But instead, this drip, drip, drip has just added to the public furor in this belief that there's this cover-up at the highest levels, which is what inspired the very followers who are mad about this to want these releases in the first place. It's not going to be going away anytime soon.
And Gretchen, when the president's asked that question directly, were you told your name is in the Epstein files? And his answer is no, no. What questions does that now raise for you?
A million others, because what's happened now is that this has left just the MAGA base caring about this. This is now in pop culture. If you asked Americans if they knew about this story 3 weeks ago, the majority would have said no. Now they're mostly saying they do, and like any good investigation, they want to know more details. So now you've left the political sphere, which was a small inside the Beltway realm, and now you're out into the general public. Colossal PR error. And if you looked at what else Donald Trump said that day after he said no, no, he immediately blamed President Obama and James Comey. So you know that he knew he was going to be asked it, and in the back of his mind, he was already had the storyline for his base.
All right, Elie, a few legal and procedural questions here. Number one, your name is in the Epstein files, not
yours. Ellie's.
What does that mean?
Something you want to tell us?
What does that mean exactly? What doesn't it mean? And then one follow-up.
So it means he's named in the Epstein files. It is important to know. It's not good. if this ever comes out, he will definitely have some very uncomfortable explaining to do, why at least he was associated with a guy who was running the largest child sex trafficking network in modern history. It does not necessarily mean Donald Trump committed a crime. It certainly does not necessarily mean that DOJ has a ready-made case that could be made indicting Donald Trump for that. So it's a very big deal, but it's important that we keep it in perspective.
Yeah, legally speaking, it doesn't indicate he did any wrongdoing at all or knew of any wrongdoing. And maybe, in fact, shows he didn't know of any wrongdoing. And if the Justice Department wanted to clear that up tonight, Ellie, and if President Trump wanted to clear that up tonight, if they wanted the American people to see how President Trump's name was mentioned in the Epstein files tonight, right now, what could they do?
Okay, I want to make sure people understand this. Conceptualize the entirety of the Epstein files. It's a little bit of an oversimplification, but let's just call it all the Epstein files. We don't know how much of this is grand jury material. In my experience, it would be very small. Let's round up and say 10%. 10% is grand jury. The other 90% is non-grand jury materials, meaning Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, the administration could publicly disclose that 90% right now, like that. And now Congress has really put DOJ in an even tighter spot by subpoenaing that. So now DOJ is going to have to either comply with that subpoena or fight it, which will make them look even worse.
The Attorney General Pam Bondi told Trump his name is in the Epstein files. Reporter Michael Wolff says he has more than 100 hours of audio tapes, 100 hours of audio tapes of his interviews with Epstein from 2014 through Epstein's arrest in 2019. That arrest, the one prior to him dying in jail. And in those tapes, first published by the Daily Beast, Wolff says Epstein told him numerous times and numerous stories about his close friendship with Trump. Here he is 2 years before his death in an audio clip shared with us by Michael Wolff. This is in 2017.
So how do you know this?
Donald's closest friend for 10 years. Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years, according to Epstein's own words. That's back in 2017. By the way, that's what many others who knew them in many different ways and times have told us. And Michael Wolff is out front now. He is the author of All or Nothing, How Trump Recaptured America. And Michael, I'm really grateful for your time. I'm grateful for you sharing some of this with us and with our show. So you estimate you talked to Epstein for more than 100 hours, which is absolutely incredible in and of itself. You did a lot of interviews all the way up to his arrest in 2019. Did you, and in all these conversations, did you get a chance to talk to him about whether Trump was aware of Epstein's crimes?
Yes, as a matter of fact, their relationship ended in 2004, and it ended because in a dispute over real estate. There was a house in Palm Beach that Epstein thought he was the top bidder on. He brought his friend Trump to look at the house and advise him on moving the swimming pool. Trump went around his back and overbid him and got the house. Epstein believed at that time that Trump didn't have the money to do this, and he started to make noise that Trump was fronting for someone, in fact, a Russian oligarch. He believed then that in retribution, Trump went to the police, informed the police about what was going on at Epstein's house in Palm Beach. That is to say, a host, a never-ending line of younger women coming into his house. So that was so Trump very precisely knew what was going on there. I've also discussed that in several places that I have seen that Epstein showed me pictures. He had about a dozen snapshots, Polaroids as I recall, of Trump with women, girls around Epstein's pool in Palm Beach. Three of them I remember. Two were of Trump sitting with topless girls of indeterminate age in his lap, and one in which he has a stain on the front of his pants, and the girls are 3 or 4 girls, also topless, are bent over, pointing and laughing at him.
So I point out, just to be clear here, of course, we don't have any evidence of wrongdoing by Trump. He's not been accused of any. But Michael, in light of all of this, what you say you've seen, your conversations, I want to play another clip from your interviews with Epstein about Trump, where Epstein told you that Trump would try to sleep with some of Trump's friends' wives, and basically by duping them. So Epstein, in this clip with you, is basically mimicking Trump. He's giving an example to you of something Trump would have said to him. Here it is.
He'd say, Michael, come on, let's go to the office. And he'd say, tell me, what's it like to be married? He'd say, you like having sex with your wife? How often do they? He'd say, it's great. Seriously, Michael, how often do we have sex? We don't want the trouble. You and I can go upstairs, or tomorrow come over. There's this girl's coming in from Los Angeles, part of the Hawaiian Tropic Coast. So come over with your car. You're going to have a great time. I promise you, Michael, it's just me and you. You're going to have a great time. Be up here at 3 o'clock. We can go upstairs. Come on, you must have had a better wife, right? I said, yes. Tell me about it. And the wife's on the speakerphone listening to Donald and said, I think you're really hot. And I know you think you're a guy. Michael is like the end of the world, the best guy on earth. You will be married to him. You're wrong. Just listen to the next 20 minutes. And you can go with the office and set you up.
That's obviously Jeffrey Epstein's voice, telling a story the way that he said Trump would have done it. Essentially, I guess, would be breaking up a marriage in a case like this. And Michael, people have long claimed Trump did this. Have someone listening in on the phone during conversations where he gets one spouse to talk about cheating on the other. What more did he tell you about Trump and women?
Well, I mean, Epstein spoke rather at length about this. I mean, this was, and let's remember the context here. They were friends from the late 80s through to 2004. This was a period in American life when the models were in the zeitgeist, supermodels, people who wanted to be models. And these two men, Epstein and Trump, this was their obsession. They were, I think it was probably the most important part of their lives. Women and money and models. They were invested in modeling agencies together. They started modeling agencies. Trump obviously had his beauty pageants. Epstein was involved with Victoria's Secret models. This was an abiding obsession. They spent an enormous amount of time chasing models, figuring out how to be with models, figuring out how to get models to like them. And people have said to me, well, you don't mean Donald Trump liked little girls. And I say, what I mean is that they were liked models. What was the age of models? And trust me, they didn't ask for IDs.
You've told a lot of stories, Michael, that you say appear in your recordings with Epstein that you haven't yet released. Epstein told you, for example, that he shared a girlfriend with Trump, actually for quite a period of time, and that they would have competitions about who would sleep with a woman first. These are all things you say he talked to you about. He also talked to you about his ex-girlfriend, Stacey Williams. Now, Stacey Williams actually was on this show last week. She shared a disturbing incident that she says she had with Trump. And this is in 1993. She said this, Michael.
Donald was outside of his door, and his hands were all over me. They were on my breasts, they were on my butt, they were on, my hips, up and down, while the two of them just kept having a normal conversation. It was a few minutes, and then we got back in the elevator, and Jeffrey's energy had changed. He was like seething, he was enraged.
So Michael, Trump obviously has denied her allegation, but you say that Jeffrey Epstein told you about this. What did he say to you?
I'm trying to remember. There is so much that I don't necessarily remember him talking specifically about Stacey Williams. I do remember when she first came forward, which was in late October. That was the impetus for me to begin to release tapes.
Was her coming forward with her story. All right, let me ask you, because you mentioned when your clips were released, you're saying that she was part of the impetus for that. But when you released them, Trump's team did attack you. They called the audio outlandish false smears. They said that Trump threw Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, not because of the real estate deal gone wrong as you describe it, but because that's what they say Trump learned about the sex trafficking allegations, and he found out, they're using the word now, creep, so they threw Epstein out. And we've heard the White House repeat this version of events in recent days. What do you say to that?
Well, the White House is clearly looking to do anything to close down this story, anything to distance Donald Trump from Jeffrey Epstein, and for good reason, because they were so close for so long. What they're saying is I think it's absolute. It's not true. It's baloney. What is credible is the details of Epstein's story about this house, which in fact Donald Trump did buy, and then bought for $40 million and sold within less than 2 years for $95 million.
All right. Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your sharing that audio with the show. Thank you.
House Speaker Mike Johnson sent members home early for a month-long recess to stop what we have seen playing out, this bipartisan push to release the Epstein documents. Then, in a surprise move, a key House subcommittee that is led by Republicans and made up of some of the president's Hill allies voted to subpoena the Justice Department to release the files. Now it needs a sign-off from the House Oversight Chair, James Comer. That may be likely, given Comer is also moving ahead with a subpoena to depose Jeffrey Epstein's former associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is a convicted sex trafficker herself and is currently serving a prison sentence in Florida. House Speaker Mike Johnson, though, questioned and cast doubt on whether or not she could be a credible voice to talk to.
I will note the obvious concern, the caveat that Chairman Comer and I and everyone has, that could she be counted on to tell the truth? Is she a credible witness? I mean, this is a person who's been sentenced to many, many years in prison for terrible, unspeakable conspiratorial acts and acts against innocent young people. I mean, can we trust what she's going to say? Even if she raises her hand and says that she'll testify under oath, is that something that can be trusted? That's a reasonable question. Is that credible evidence? I don't know, but we'll have to see.
Speaker Johnson himself questioning whether or not she'd be a credible voice to hear from. We should note that the administration will be also having a direct conversation with Ghislaine Maxwell after we learned from Attorney General Pam Bondi that the Deputy Attorney General will be setting up a meeting with her. I am told by two people familiar with the meeting that the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is expected to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell as soon as tomorrow. My inside sources are here tonight. Politico's Dasha Burns, CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Elliot Williams, and also investigative reporter for the Miami Herald, Julie K. Brown, who is the author of Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein story, and one of the best source reporters on this. And Dasha, let me start with you, though, just on the fallout that we're seeing happening here in Washington. I'm told this meeting is expected to happen as soon as tomorrow. I think there's real questions about what they're going to actually get from Ghislaine Maxwell, what they're going to learn in this. But what are you hearing about the briefing that happened between the Attorney General Pam Bondi and President Trump over his name being included in the Epstein files?
Yeah, so my White House sources have really been brushing off this reporting. They're saying, look, his name being mentioned in the files, what does that even mean? No one's been clear about exactly what context it's been mentioned in. They're saying that this is nothing new, that everyone has seen the photos of Trump and Epstein. Everybody knows that they associated along with many other high-profile names, and they're saying that this is sensationalized reporting. The other thing that I'm hearing over and over again, Caitlin, is that the president is furious that this news cycle is eating up what they thought was going to be a moment for a real victory lap between the two sort of heavy lifts that they achieved in Congress, the trade deals that he's been announcing. They've been doing everything that they can to shift the narrative, and then they're in this unfamiliar position of being unable to change the conversation.
I mean, Ellie, what do you make of all this in terms of what the Justice Department is now doing and how they're trying to get information but not release everything at once, but you're seeing House Republicans try to force them to do so?
It's damage control that's unmoored from how law enforcement or prosecutions would work in any number of ways. Let's really step back and think about what it really will mean to work with Ghislaine Maxwell. And Mike Johnson talked about this a little bit. Number one, anyone who is a convicted felon, if their testimony ought to be viewed with a certain degree of skepticism, number one. Number two, if they are going to get quality evidence out of her, they're probably going to have to strike some kind of deal with her and lower her sentence or even let her out of prison. Now, is that what the road they want to go down for the sole purpose of winning the PR battle over this, just because the internet is clamoring for it? And finally, the idea of the Deputy Attorney General himself, an individual who runs a $44 million entity, massive entity with 115,000 employees, why he's doing a jailhouse interview with somebody is a bizarre use of his time. I've never seen a Deputy Attorney General.
And they risk not satisfying the base with this at all, because if none of this turns up what everyone is so hungry for in the MAGA base, that's still a problem for them.
And we know why he's going down there, because they basically have their hand forced by Republicans and by the MAGA base, who's been outraged with their handling over this. And Julie K. Brown, that's why, I mean, you are the best source reporter on this and reported extensively on this, and you're part of the reason why we know so much about this case in the first place, when it wasn't getting enough attention from prosecutors. On the credibility part, we did hear from Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney today, David Oscar Marcus. He said in a statement to CNN, they understand Speaker Johnson's concern, he said, and I want to quote him now. He said, if Ms. Maxwell agrees to testify before Congress and not take the fifth, and that remains a big if, she would testify truthfully, as she has always said she would, and she will with Mr. Blanche. The truth should not be feared or preemptively dismissed. I wonder what you make of that.
Well, she's testified under oath before and been charged with perjury. So I'm still not certain how that makes this any prettier, really, quite frankly. Also, remember, the victims really believe that she was the mastermind behind Epstein. Epstein, she was the one that started the whole pyramid scheme, going to spas and gyms throughout Palm Beach and recruiting these young girls, and then using them to turn over other girls, their friends. So she started this whole pyramid scheme in Palm Beach. And throughout the trial, she denied that she even knew some of these women. She completely denied that any of this ever happened. So it's hard to understand how, even if she said, if I'll testify under oath, I'll tell the truth. Well, she didn't tell the truth the other times that she had to go under oath.
The one thing that I read in a statement from her attorney a few weeks ago was that clearly she would like a pardon here. They were saying that, when they were appealing her conviction to the Supreme Court here, that is something the president could offer her, a reduction in her sentence or a pardon. Do you believe that she would tell them anything substantial without an indication that she's going to get something in return for it?
No, she knows where the skeletons are, and I don't think she will do anything without getting some kind of a deal. And, I think that what the victims are looking at here is potential for a sweetheart deal 2.0. In other words, first, the Justice Department gives Jeffrey Epstein this slap on the wrist plea deal, this sweetheart deal, and now they're looking at doing it with Maxwell. I mean, I just think that that's not going to send a good message to the victims or to the public.
And can I just ask you also, Julie, just given your reporting on this, Elon Musk said publicly months ago that Trump was in the Epstein files. It's not totally a surprise that Pam Bondi briefed him on that. But I wonder, what a significance should people attach to that, if any?
It's hard for me to say. I don't really know Musk's motives. It seems like his motives change all the time. He's not been consistent. So it's hard for me to say. But what I will say about this is that even though we've known for a long time that that Trump's name is in there. For example, we know that he was on the plane passenger list for Epstein's plane. We know that he was on some of the phone messages that they found in a search of Epstein's home. We know that he was in the black book. But the idea that if that's all there was, which really doesn't show that Trump did anything, any wrongdoing at all, then why all this resistance to releasing this material? It sort of makes one consider whether there's a lot more there that we don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, Natasha, how does the White House respond to that? Because that does raise the question of they have made so clear they want this to go away and want to stop talking about it, but now seem to be bowing to that pressure in a real way. And also House Republicans might be forcing their hand on a lot of this.
Yeah, and look, the more that they've tried to make this go away, the louder those voices have really become. And then Democrats have jumped on the bandwagon as well. So this is, again, a time when the president has been backed into a corner. When the White House, one source told me, I have never seen the White House so frozen on something because this seemingly unbreakable bond between the president and the base seems to have broken here, and the White House is a bit paralyzed on where to go from here. They don't want a special counsel because they feel like that'll open up too many cans of worms, but they are doing this sort of drip method here that I don't get a sense that they feel like this is going to satisfy anybody in the end. So they're really just hoping that there will be other news cycles that will distract from this. You were in the briefing room with me today when they had Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, come out and try to point fingers at Obama and release other documents that have nothing to do with this. But the changing of the subject isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, Elliot, what do you make of that? And in terms of also just, you know, to your point earlier, like sending the Deputy Attorney General to go meet with someone convicted of child sex trafficking and hopes that she's going to produce something that would quell this, maybe, but it doesn't seem likely right now.
Right, and again, we have to make clear what actually would be released. And, you know, I think it was to Julie's point. So perhaps Donald Trump's name is on some file or some list somewhere. He's not being accused of a crime. And quite frankly, from the Wall Street Journal reporting today, it was clear that the Attorney General had said to the president that, you know, they didn't have anything further that would trigger more investigation. So we're talking about releasing the names of individuals just to embarrass them. And that's something that our criminal justice system does not do and should not do, even if they're unpopular people. And even if you're talking about potential sex crimes, if you're not actually going to charge someone with a crime, you do not release their names. And this, we're going down a dangerous road with talking about putting some of this material out.
I will say the meeting tomorrow could be critical because what Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney said to me earlier is, as for the congressional subpoena, she's taking it one step at a time and is doing this meeting, and then that will help inform how she proceeds. So we'll see what happens there. Great to have you, Julie K. Brown. A special thanks to you as well, just given your deep insights on this.